Hello, I'm Sophia.
And I'm Izzy from Artist Aside, where we focus on everything going on behind the scenes in the music industry.
Welcome back to the Anthology podcast by Artist Aside, where we spotlight the music's hidden heroes who helped make some of our favourite records.
In this week's episode, we'll be looking at four-time platinum album Parklife by British rock band Blur.
It is an album that defined the Britpop era and was hugely successful upon its release, and helped Blur win big at the 1995 Brit Awards, taking home Best British Album, Single, Video and Group.
The album consistently shows up in the best records of all time lists and has sold over 1 million copies since its 1994 release.
And today we are joined by producer Stephen Street. Hello, Stephen.
Hi there. How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Very good, thank you.
Good to hear. So I suppose the first question really is, what was your kind of road into production like? Kind of how did you start off in the world?
Well, yeah, I was a kind of budding musician for a few years in the band or in a series of bands, I should say. And it got to a point in my early 20s where I felt I wasn't really kind of getting where I wanted to, being a musician in the band. But the limited amount of experience I had working, recording in the studio kind of made me feel perhaps that was the route I wanted to go down rather than being a musician, like trying to become a recording engineer and hopefully combining that with the kind of limited musical ability that I had, hopefully becoming a producer. At the time in the early 80s, there were a lot of kind of young kind of engineer producers that were doing very well, kind of working with all the post-punk bands. People like Steve Lillywhite, Martin Russian, Martin Hannett, doing all the Factory stuff. John Leckie. These were guys who were all kind of primarily recording engineers, but were becoming producers and making great records at the time as well. And so I thought if I could try, being inspired by their journey, I thought if I could become a recording engineer, then hopefully I could kind of follow the same kind of path. And fortunately, it worked out.
Yeah, I think you can say that it has been a successful career choice.
I joined Island Records, which was a lucky move. I mean, I joined Island working for them. They had a small basement studio called the Fallout Shelter. And I started there, and I think I was the only assistant there for a while. So I was working quite a lot of hours. But it was kind of really kind of being thrown in at the deep end, and obviously working for a label as good as Island, it meant also that I was working on kind of good quality stuff as well. So I was very lucky in that respect.
And so, like, in terms of obviously what we're talking about today, talking about Parklife, you reached out after hearing "You're So High." We've heard by Blur.
She's So High.
She's So High. Sorry.
Yeah.
Mixing up my words. And what was it about that track that made you think that I want to work with these guys next?
Just I'd heard the record on the radio. I'd seen the video. It was like a kind of, I can't remember. It was a Sunday afternoon thing when they were doing like the new releases, and I just saw a glimpse of the video for that record, and I just saw. Well, one, I love the guitar work, and obviously, being associated with the Smiths, and obviously, Johnny's incredible guitar work. It was something that I really kind of felt connected with. Working with kind of good guitarists and kind of alternative indie type bands, and I straight away picked up on how good Graham's guitar work was on that record. And when I saw the video of them, they just looked like such a cool band. All the best bands look cool. Whether it was Echo and the Bunnymen or the Smiths, or I think they've got to look like a band, and they did. And Blur just kind of struck me as like being something I thought perhaps I could work with these guys. So normally I get approached by the A&R person at the record label when they sign the band to ask me if I'd like to get involved in producing them. But in this kind of case, this was a rare one because my manager at the time, a lady called Gail Coulson, she was managing Jesus Jones, who were on the same label as Blur. So I said to Gail, look, next time you're talking to Dave Balfe, who is the head of Food Records, the label to which the band are signed, I said, can you let Balfe know that I would be interested, if they are looking for a producer, to work with them? And initially, I got the message back, it's okay, the band are going to make the record with the same production team that had done She's So High. But I was like, oh, it's a bit of a disappointment, but never mind. But then they came back to me a week or two later and said, actually, the band would like to meet you with the view to perhaps working with you. So I went up to Food HQ and met them, had a couple of beers with them, and we decided to do a test session, as it were, in the first week of January that year. I think it was 91 or 92, I can't remember now. And that happened to be what became There's No Other Way. And of course, I went away then recording a project in New York for a couple of months and came back and found that record was shooting up the charts. So I was asked to do more work with the guys. So that was really the start of a very long working relationship.
I mean, we can see from your studio how much you love guitars from the ones on the walls behind you. And I agree. I think it's one of the elements of songs and music that really kind of stand out to me.
Yeah.
And what I love the most about them. What was the collaboration process like with Blow? What were they like as a band to work with?
When I met them originally, I bet then they were very young. I mean, they were only in their early to mid-20s. It was, nail biting for them. So they'd just been signed. They knew they'd done fairly well with their first release, but it was, as anything, you've got to follow up and get the next hit. So fortunately, we managed to do that with There's No Other Way. But what struck me was the chemistry between all four members. It's really important. I mean, Damon, as we all know, is the most kind of driven artist that there is most probably on the planet. He's incredible. He just doesn't stop working. He's always got lots of different projects on. And even back then, he had a real strong kind of driving force. But you, as a producer, you can't allow that to obliterate everyone else in the band having their opinion, And I was very keen on making sure that, everyone else within the band got their kind of say as well on their input on the recording sessions. It was obvious to me that Graham was incredibly talented as a guitar player. Bit shy, nowhere near as forthcoming as Damon, but still a very strong force to be reckoned with, within the band. So I tapped into, that pretty quickly. But then Alex as well. I mean, Alex is the easiest going guy probably in the world, but his bass lines were so kind of sinuous and musical, and again very critical to the how the Blur sound. So I was really focusing, as I said, on making sure that I got every single one of the members' opinion heard and considered when we were doing the recording. Because if you don't, you're going to have some dejected members of the band, and if that happens, the chances of them wanting to work with you again are kind of minimized.
Did you find coming into working with them, saying about the chemistry of the band, did you find that you ended up changing a certain dynamic almost then?
The best thing about record production is to try and be a guiding, I've used this term before, but a big brother, not in the 1994 sense, but a big brother, an older brother in like you've been there, you've been down routes before where things have got stuck in, and so you're trying to kind of advise them through the whole process so no one they don't get stuck, they don't kind of make the wrong turn and make the wrong decision in the studio. And there's times when you step in and you have to kind of do something and kind of advise, and there's times when you just stand back and let them play, and let things just flow. You don't want to be someone that's dictatorial and kind of saying this is the way it's going to be. This, you've got to be. The man management side of it is very, very important, as much as the technical side, if not more.
I don't think, talking about kind of processing things, how long did the album take to make? Because I read you said it was quite, was it quite like a, what's the word? Quite like cut process, like very, very quick.
Parklife was spread out really, in the sense that we finished Modern Life is Rubbish, and we knew that we'd done a good job with that. And I mean, although when it first came out commercially, it wasn't a huge hit, there seemed to be a bit of a buzz. The crowd, the fan base was still growing, and the people that did like Blur loved the album. So we knew we were onto something good, and we knew that if we could follow up with another album relatively quickly, and it was full of good songs, then there was a chance they would jump up to that next level. Unfortunately, that did happen. But initially, the way it used to work was that the band would go and demo some songs. Food Records would listen to them and say, right, you can do song A, B, D, and E, with Stephen and whatever. And then so we'd be given the authorization to go in and do certain songs. And I think when we started off initially, we did do, I think, Jubilee and Parklife, the track itself, and some other tracks. And then we took a break because they were doing some touring still at the time. And then we went back in to do another kind of main session. And in that session, we recorded Girls and Boys. And obviously that was very different to what we'd done before, because with Girls and Boys, instead of just going in and putting down the track pretty much live, we programmed up the kind of synth drums and synthesizers, and then put that down, and then got the band to play to that. So it had that kind of, sub dance kind of disco-y type beat. And it worked out really well. But it was weird because I had the record company phone me and ask me how things were going. And I said, well, it's going great. We've just recorded a song called Girls and Boys. And Andy Ross, God bless him, who's sadly no longer with us, but he was the head A&R person at Food, said to me, Stephen, you've not been authorized to do that one. And I went, oh, okay. I said, well, you're going to love it when you hear it. I'm sure you're going to like it. And well, sure enough, they did, and that's the version that we recorded. That was finally released, and I knew that when we recorded that, although it was very different to anything Blur had done, it seemed to kind of somehow just fit into everything. I mean, as soon as you get Graham Coxon playing his part on top, anyway, it's always going to sound like Blur. So. And it gave the guys the biggest hit they'd had so far, and it really did kind of kick them up to the next level. So that was good, I really enjoyed making that record because we just had fun with everything. I mean, if you listen to it, it's quite varied. It's a very varied album, and I like that though. I think that's the kind of thing. Even my love of people like the Beatles and Bowie and so on. What I loved about them was that they never got stuck in just doing one type of music. It was always kind of trying new things, and I think we achieved that very well with the Parklife album.
And you said with the synths and everything, and then kind of working on records that weren't assigned to you, that there were some risks taken. Do you think that was kind of a theme across the album, that you were taking risks with the songs and the production techniques?
The general vibe about Modern Life is Rubbish was that we'd managed to break the band free of that kind of, they got a bit associated with the Manchester, the Manchester thing, and the the groovy kind of beats and so on thing, which I mentioned did happen under There's No Other Way. So the band were very keen to break into this more very British kind of type of music, very much in kind of following the lineage of people like Ray Davies and Bowie and the Beatles and stuff. And so for me, that's kind of thing I'm really into myself. So it was like, what flavor do we need for this song? Which way do we go with it? We let the song dictate where we went, rather than making the song try and fit an overall theme on the album. And that was kind of exciting, and we felt kind of vindicated by the fact that, as I said, Modern Life is Rubbish had kind of been a slow burner, but it made it gave the band the freedom that they needed to go ahead and start being a little bit even more experimental, but not experimental just for experiment's sake. There was still a very keen thing, and I think Damon's very good at this, of knowing how to write a pop hit, and whereas Radiohead would go further down that avenue of getting more and more abstract and so on, Blur didn't really feel the need to do that, especially not then anyway. They were very keen still on writing 3.5 minute, 4 minute pop songs.
I think it's just a brilliant album. Like you say, you have that variation in songs like Girls and Boys, but there is just it's really hard to describe a really good album, because you just listen to it and it's right almost.
Yeah.
And it's interesting what you say kind of about, not playing to a theme, because obviously a massive thing with Blur is Britpop. It was, the 90s, Britpop was just raging, and you had these bands like Oasis and Pulp kind of coming from the north, where the Blur had this very almost Southern English sound, but it wasn't Southern English in the way of like it's very, very posh or very like that. Was that kind of an intention going into it that they really wanted to kind of reflect that London almost aspect?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in a way, I mean, obviously, London Loves is a great track, and that kind of that mentions London, and I think Damon at that time was still writing songs quite often about kind of third person characters and so on as well. But and again, that's a kind of very much the kind of thing that Ray Davies used to do, you know, and Ray Davies would kind of mention London, obviously Waterloo Sunset and so on. So Damon, I think, was kind of, you know, he was writing about things he knew about, which I think is good. You know, it's right. But, you know, it's funny because, you know, this thing about Brit pop, and it kind of became like a bit of a dirty name and so on, and because it kind of got associated with just that kind of laddism thing that was going around with the magazines and so on in the mid-90s and so on. But there's nothing, I mean, I would say that, you know, bands like, you know, Echo and the Bunnymen and The Cure and the Smiths were Britpop back in the 80s, you know?
Yeah.
They were exactly the same. They were just British bands, mostly guitar-based, that made great records that actually appeared on Top of the Pops and actually hit the charts. And I would argue that was Britpop. I would argue that the Beatles and the Stones were Britpop in the 60s. You know, I just don't like the way it kind of, this Britpop in the 90s got kind of really kind of made into this particular thing that encompassed a lot of things that I didn't like, you know, about some of the things in the 90s. I feel that just good quality pop music that is clever, catchy, and sounds good on the radio. There's nothing wrong with that. I think it's nothing. Some people might sneer at that and think, you know, it's where's the kind of the artistic kind of darker side, and bands can touch into that. I mean, Blur did later on when they made albums like 13, but there's nothing wrong with making some really good kind of well structured pop music, and I think it's what the band really did achieve on the Parklife album.
So I think maybe Britpop became, it was more of a cultural term than anything to maybe do with the music. Whether you look at The Who and The Jam, how many, you know, years back before, and it's still like, to me, that sounds like Britpop.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, as you say, it's a cultural thing rather than, and it became very popular. I mean, what I loved about the situation we had at that time, you know, when Pulp and Blur and Oasis were hitting the charts, is that there's only a few years previously, the only people kind of really breaking into platinum records and so on were the Tina Turners and the Phil Collins of this world and the Annie Alexes, you know. I mean, and guitar bands weren't getting anywhere near those kind of sales figures. But suddenly, we're in a situation where, you know, bands like Blur and Oasis and Pulp and Supergrass are having kind of like huge selling records. And that's wonderful, you know, because you're working, unlike now, you know, you're working on records, you know, there's a very good chance you're going to hear it on radio and see it in the charts. Whereas now, I think we're all kind of working in a vacuum because it doesn't matter what we make, it never, you don't ever see it get in the chart at all.
We are in our early 20s, so we didn't grow up in that era of music. We come to it later and become fans of it later. So we are kind of removed from like the kind of cultural aspect of what was going on at the time.
Yeah, we kind of look back on it as it was the music, when really, you know, when you read stuff about it, it was very different. I imagine like creating it, like you said, it may be a dirty word. I can understand how that was, because it maybe felt almost being pigeonholed, like in that.
Or placing so much more pressure on, like, in comparison to other bands that didn't need to be, when it's just really about the music.
Absolutely. As I say, and there was a time, I think, you know, in the early 2000s where, you know, bands just did not want to be associated with that term, you know, Britpop, because it kind of seemed to kind of demean what they were about. And it's a shame, really, because actually it was a really good time when British pop music was really quite classy and and intelligent and you know, just fantastic, well-written songs. And as I said, we had a period of time there where we're making records of that kind of genre who were actually hitting the charts and doing really, really well.
Do you think it says something maybe about where we stand with music now? Because I think there is maybe elements of guitar music in like modern day stuff, but I don't think it's near as like present as it was. What do you think that maybe says about how maybe like British music has changed since?
I think, there always are good guitar bands out there. I've worked with plenty over the last kind of 15, 20 years, but as I've mentioned, it's so hard. There's so much being released now, and with the streaming thing, it's really changed a whole way the music industry works. And there's so many tracks getting released each week that it's like finding a needle in a haystack, kind of finding, good, decent new music. And there are bands out there that are playing and they're creating a real kind of buzz, and they sound really, really cool. But for some reason, they're just it's really hard to be heard above the kind of the Ed Sheerans and the Drakes and the Taylor Swifts of this world, where they just dominate all the streaming platforms. So it's a bit of a shame, really. A lot of bands just don't make much money from their recorded music anymore. They just got to make it from t-shirt sales and touring. But touring's expensive. A lot of bands actually lose money from that as well. So you do wonder where the money's going to come from a lot of new artists.
Yeah, it's kind of overwhelming, the amount of music that you have the ability to be exposed to.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's harder to kind of find really what you like and what you enjoy the most.
Yeah.
But as we've kind of said, Parklife, when it came out at the time, it was received amazingly and has really kind of still stood the test of time. Did you realise in the moment when you were producing it that it was going to do so well? Did you think you had something special?
I did feel quietly confident that we made a really good record. Yeah. Once we kind of had songs, like Girls and Boys, End of the Century. I loved London Loves. I thought that was a great track. This Is a Low. That was kind of finished towards the end, and that I knew that was a fantastic song. Yeah, I did feel quite confident. I was. I felt. The band were getting us. The band were always good live, and they were getting better and better live as well. So I knew that with them going out and playing live and playing these songs as well as the best songs they had from early on in their career, that they were all onto a winner. And sure enough, it happened. And they were very photogenic as well. So when they were on Top of the Pops and so on, there'd be a good positive reaction, and obviously getting all the magazines and press.
You kind of obviously saying they were getting better and better live. Was there an intention of trying to translate their live, how they were live, into the recording process?
Well, yeah, we would record live. That would be it. When the guys were doing a backing track, it would be a case of Dave and Alex and Graham playing the backing track together in the studio, with Damon doing a guide vocal, and then we'd go back and overdub on top of it and so on. But underlying it all would always be a performance that was put together by musicians playing, because we were recording on tape now, back then rather, whereas now everyone's kind of doing bits and pieces in blocks in Logic or Pro Tools or whatever. But then it was very much a case of playing live. So that was always there, that element of performance. It was always a crucial part of it.
Yeah, on a similar note, what do you think are the production techniques that really give the album its sound and make it stand out even today?
First and foremost, you've got to have the song. That you can have the best sounding drum kit, the best kind of choice of reverbs or guitar tones in the world, but if the song sucks, then it's not going to stand the test of time. And the great thing here is that the guys, particularly Damon, had written a fantastic collection of songs, and put together, it's a very cohesive piece of work. It's, as I said, it is varied, but it's a bit like how Revolver is varied for the Beatles, and that's my favorite Beatles album. That album is here, there, it's all over the place as far as types of music, but it just seems to hang together well. And I think we managed to get that same kind of balance with the Parklife album.
Do you have a favorite one on the record? I know you've mentioned a few, but I read that Parklife was not your favorite.
The track was a difficult track to kind of get right, and it wasn't until we got Phil Daniels on it to kind of do the voiceover that it started making a bit more sense. But it was a song that it was frustrating to kind of get right. And for me personally, it's not my favorite song on the record by any means. I'm a big fan of. I really like London Loves, and I really like This Is a Low. Clover Over Dover, I think, is a lovely song. You know, I just think, yeah, I just love those tracks, and Girls and Boys I've got a soft spot for, because I knew it was a very crucial song to have, that kind of took everything up to the next level.
Obviously, you spend so much time when you're recording and producing listening back to the album. Do you think you kind of have to take a break upon its release before you can listen again and really enjoy it?
I think that's something that occurs to me all the time. Is at the time when you're making a record, you kind of feel, oh, it's one of the best things I've ever done, and you're really, really kind of excited and buzzing by it. And then by the time you finish, you go through this period of doubt, self-doubt. It's very hard to listen to it for a while, because you're listening to it as a recording rather than a record. And you've got to kind of have some distance from it for a while. And sometimes you can't really appreciate something until you hear it by chance on the radio, or walking past a shop and you hear it coming out the shop. That's when you can enjoy it again, because that's when you hear it again like a punter. Yeah. You hear it like a record. You're hearing everything in one go, and you're not sitting there worrying about the bass drum level or the reverb that you used on the voice. You know, you just listen to it and take it in as one. And that's often a process that I go through with the lots of things that I work on. You go through this horrible kind of self-doubt part just at the very end, and when you've got to let it go, and a bit of distance and a bit of time does help to appreciate something again.
You've worked with Blur a few more times in your career after Parklife, and I believe, did you do that album in 2015?
Yeah, The Magic Whip. Yeah, yes. Yeah.
How did you find, was there any difference in kind of in between, you know, say we were to pinpoint those two records, did the process change? Was you saying about the chemistry of the band was so important?
I personally hadn't worked with them since the Blur album, which was 1996. I'd worked with Graham on a few of his solo records, so that was really the only kind of contact really I had with them. So it was, with the Magic Whip, it was very different, because obviously it wasn't us going in the studio from scratch and recording everything from scratch. It was more a case they had been in Hong Kong just putting down some kind of ideas and demos, and that this was very much now kind of just recording everything into a computer. And so when Graham first approached me to find out if I could help to see if there was anything there, it was more a case of me kind of taking the files, you know, the computer files, and sifting through and seeing what there was. And then, so that was more a case of the production was very different. That's much more kind of a Pro Tools kind of type approach of going into something, editing things around, then sitting down with Graham, getting him to play new guitars on top. And then sometimes we then got Dave to do new drums and Alex to do new bass lines as well. So it was a bit of a backwards thing. It wasn't the way we normally would go around recording things. But I think it worked out well in the end. You know, I think we managed to make at this point when we were doing that, we weren't even sure Damon wanted to make it, you know, a proper Blur record. Because he was too busy doing other projects at the time, and he wasn't, you know, I don't think he was completely sure about whether it was going to be a Blur album or not. But once Graham and I played in what we've been doing in the studio, then Damon heard it and went, absolutely, I love it. So and then once we got, you know, Damon back on board and he put the new vocals and everything down, it really did take shape, and I think it turned into, you know, a really good Blur album. Working with Blur was always an absolute pleasure. I mean, as I said, we had a nice natural kind of balance, good teamwork between us. The chemistry was really good between, as I said, as well as the chemistry being right between the band members, the chemistry was good between me and the band as well. Yeah. And it was always a pleasure working with them. In fact, I mean, this studio I'm in here, this is in Damon Albarn's building.
Wow. Yeah. Good relationships then.
The Damon Studio 13, this is the 13 complex, as it were, the 13 building.
Oh, wow.
And so this is, so Damon is my landlord. So I still see him from time to time, and we're good mates. We go back a long way, and long may it continue.
Just don't go ticking him off now if he's your landlord. And again, you've worked on so many records over your career, but is there any albums that you didn't produce yourself that you wish you could have worked on? Or even if you think you listen to that and you're like, oh, I would have done this to that track, I would have done this to that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously when Blur left me to work with William Orbit on what became the 13 album, I was saddened by that, and I would have liked to have been involved in that one. But I think you have to accept that people do have to try new things and work with different, producers and so on. So I can totally understand their reasoning. As for acts I like to have worked with, looking back on things, I would have liked to have perhaps worked with REM at one point. I think I could have made a good record with them, perhaps. I can't think of anything else at the moment. I mean, there's I try not to think about the records I wish I'd made. I'm just kind of happy I made the ones that I did make.
Amazing. I think that is everything.
Yeah.
We have to you. But thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
It's been lovely speaking with you. Yeah, thank you so much.
All right then.
It's been fascinating to talk to you.
All the very best. All right then. Look after yourself.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's podcast. We'll be back next Thursday.
For now, keep up to date with the magazine on our socials @ArtistsDecide, and you may even get some hints for the next album we'll be looking at.
See you next week.